Bam.
This is David Bethel. You're watching the Break It Down show.
We were just talking off mic about being an author and doing shows like this, and I thought we might just start there because this is a new world. I mean, for new authors, for established authors, you can do all of these shows with these very focused audiences that love books, and they they become new readers, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on the access that you have to these different groups as opposed to like going on, I don't know, KTLA or doing radio spots?
Well, they're just as valuable, I guess. And I think, as you said, it's a whole new world. We are still experimenting with all of this to see how it works for people. But given the reactions I'm getting to the to shows like yours that I'm doing, you all are doing something right. It's reaching a lot of people.
Yeah. It is amazing because you have a sense of well, I'm a tastemaker. You're a tastemaker. You're writing something you think people will like. I'm having people on that I think like, hey, people are going to like this, right? We're trying to establish this. Does it have the reach of, I don't know, being on Good Morning America? No, but you know what? I've not watched Good Morning America in years. So there's other people out there that are doing things. And I think that's a critical difference in the modern media and the increased reach you have. But it is a lot of work.
Well, it's a lot of progression. I mean, you talk about, I'm old enough to remember when radio was king.
Yeah.
And then we had, you went from that to television. You had 3 networks on television. Now you have all the cable networks, and you have much more going on than just television. You got satellites and all the rest of it. So it's a progression. You have to be able to operate in all these different worlds if you want to do something with yourself.
Yeah. How does that impact your writing?
I don't know that it does, really.
Okay.
I mean, I don't write with the idea that I'm going to have to sit here with you or other people and market it. I write because I like to write, and I get these stories that tickle my brain, and I have to get them down on I would have said years ago, piece of paper. I have to sit in front of my computer and get them out of my brain so that I can move on to something else. Otherwise, it nags at me and I can't do anything.
Yeah. Is your story generator machine in your head, is that thing ever going to run dry, or do you now have the confidence that like it's always going to do something? However, it sounds like they are a little bit precious.
I haven't reached a point where I think I might run dry. I write the way I read. That is, I want to know. I don't have outlines. I don't do backgrounds, character backgrounds, and all the rest of it like so many writers do. I get an idea from reading a newspaper, from reading a book, from just walking around the neighborhood, and that it sticks in my head. And I can't, as I said just now, I can't go on until I sit down and get it on a piece of paper. And what I do is I will write out the first scene based on what it is that's nagging at me, and I go from there. Whatever happens in the book is a result of going from one page to the next. I don't know sometimes what's going to happen in the next paragraph. It's called pantsing it. By the seat of my pants, I just write, and that's how I write. And I've never had writer's block. I've never had a problem. If I come to a point in a book where I think it's going to cause me a problem, I just keep writing. I just keep going until I'm done with the problem and I'm flowing again.
Yeah. When we laser in on that, because it's one thing to say, hey, I start writing and I'm right by the seat of my pants, and it's like once there was a time, and then the end. There's a whole lot of back and forthing in there too, right? Like, yes, you're writing, but you're like, ooh, I'm going to take this problem and twist it. I'm going to, bring in this perspective, and that's going to change. You must be doing that all throughout the process, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like starting with building blocks. You have one block, and then you have 2 blocks, then you have 3, and then you realize, wait a minute, the third block should have gone where the first one is, and so on and so forth. And when you get to the middle of the book and you have 30 or 40,000 words, and you're checking the chronology, and you're realizing, Christ, this guy couldn't have known this because he's not there in the book yet, at that point in the book yet. So, yeah, there's a lot of that, and you have to be patient, and you have to be willing to, sometimes have to be willing to scrap whole parts of your book and start all over again.
Does that hurt?
Oh, absolutely. Because you think you're being brilliant. I mean, I've written some brilliant words on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
for pages, and I realized, this just doesn't fit. And it's like cutting off a
Yeah.
finger when you get rid of it. It's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah. But you also know to do it and go ahead and chop that finger off because the new one's going to grow and you're going to be fine. I mean, this is,
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
you're
You have to
seasoned.
be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. How long did it like so when you go to a party, I love to ask this question. What do you tell people that you do?
I'm a writer. That's what I do. And they,
Okay.
of course, then they
Right.
always say, well, what does that mean exactly? What do you
Exactly.
write?
Yes.
And I say, well, I
Yeah.
write everything. I mean, I've written short stories. I've written, if we go back to the beginning of all of this, I started out in Washington as a speechwriter and a press secretary, and then slowly graduated to where I am today. So, I mean, I'll write anything. They say a writer writes, and that's what I do. I write.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Writers, actors, directors, producers, all these people, you can do these things at all of the levels, right? I mean, Stephen King could say, "Oh, I'm a writer," and that means something different
Of
than
course.
someone who writes technical manuals. Both writers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, it's one of those things. Everybody always says, "Well, what does that mean, really?" And of course, then you have to dig into your bag of tricks and explain it all to them. But my career has been pretty diverse, as I just mentioned. It started in Washington, where I was a speechwriter, and then doing strategic communications for various PR and political organizations, and then and now into fiction writing. So I've had quite a divergent career.
Yeah. What's the difference between speech writing and writing books? Your books
Completely
specifically.
different world. Completely. When you write a speech, you are writing to an audience. People are going to be hearing the words. When you write a book, people are going to be reading the words. I would
Mm,
say that when you write a speech, it's maybe the language is a little more broad, a little maybe sometimes a little more elemental than it would be in writing fiction, writing something to be read. Because if you'll notice, when you're listening to someone speak, very often they jump subjects, and you make that mental jump yourself. You know what to put between the two sentences that don't necessarily go together.
right.
When you're writing, you can't do that. You have to make sure there's that sentence between the two. You don't make that jump mentally, especially when you're writing fiction, when you have characters, when you have a plot, when you have so many things, different things going on. A speech is a completely different animal.
When people say that this book doesn't have a plot, what are they really saying? Because you know that you're putting a plot and you're checking it, and it's pretty normal for most successful authors, people who do it more than twice, that they know what a plot is, right? But we often feel like we've lost it, it isn't there. What are your thoughts on plot?
I'm My wife says that I'm a plot writer, that I write
Okay.
stories. I don't write characters. Um, so when you can't I don't know how you can write a book without a plot. I mean, maybe that's
Right.
just me. I mean, you can write a wonderful story about someone picking daisies, or falling in love, or having kids, but unless it has a plot, unless there is a reason, I guess, for someone to be doing something, it's
Yeah.
not a story, and the reason is the plot. In my view, anyway.
Yeah. Right. So, what do we struggle with as audience members? How do we get lost in the plot?
Well, if the plot is I think, too complex, and there are too many
Hmm.
characters, there's too much going on. I can see someone well, I've done it. I mean, you read a Russian novel, you have to have a completely different mindset for reading a Russian novel than if you're reading Hemingway.
Yeah.
Hemingway who I think is probably one of the greatest writers of all time, but wrote very simply, very simple sentences, went from one page to the next very easily. If you read a Russian novel, you're dealing with 15 different characters doing 15 different things. And although at the end it's enjoyable when you put it all together, when you're reading it, it can be, in my view, it can be excruciating.
Yeah. Yeah. That is perfectly describing. It is wonderful to get through a Russian novel, one, because you've just gotten through it and it is a lot of work, but it is not what I would call gentle reading, right? Like first off, you probably have all new names, all new places, so you have no frame of reference. If you're writing in the style of Stephen J. Cannell, I know a lot of what you're going to be writing about. You're going to be in the LA area. There's going to be cops involved and maybe some smuggling. We know these worlds, right? But you get into Russia, it's a lot harder. And then the names are different, and they take their time to tell their stories.
Well, it's like James Joyce, reading some of his stuff, reading Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake. It's for me, that's a work, that's a job. And I can't say I really enjoyed the novels. I think I probably was feeling fairly self-righteous when I finished them, that I actually got through them. I remember in college, I read Ulysses and I had no idea what I was reading. I had to read another book to
Oh
understand
my
what's
God.
going on in Ulysses. So, but there are people, obviously there are people that enjoy that, and more power to them.
Yeah, yeah, and people find the voice that they like, right? I'm with you. I'm pretty. In my youth, I was very stick to itiveness. I would get through something no matter what, because it was a commitment to myself and to the author, even if I was like, this book sucks. But yeah, I'll work hard at some novels, and other novels same length, like a Tom Clancy classic page turner. You just can't stop flipping the pages, and you end up staying up to 6 in the morning finishing the book and in one long sitting.
Well, it also has to be a subject you're interested in.
Mm.
I've picked up books that people love, and it's just not a subject that I'm interested in. And as I get older, it's as with anything else in life. As you get older, you just you don't want to be bothered with it. So we're, as you said, where you might not have put it aside when you're younger. As you get older, I just don't have time. I'll put it aside and start another one.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of books. I'll pull a book in right here. This book right here by Stephen Dorrell is about MI6. And this book is probably 25 years old now. If you don't have the requisite reading to get into the book, you won't get. I mean, this thing is dense and it's heavy. It's like a 5 pound book.
It's a door.
You have to have. Yeah, it's literally a door stop. It's an earthquake bashed my header is what it is up here in this bookshelf. But it's very hard to read, and so when I do take it up and I read, I'm reading it to find out what I need to read about the thing that I'm reading about. It's almost like I use it like a reverse concordance, where I'm like, I want to learn more about what MI6 does. Let me start in here until they get lost in something, and then go read about that topic, because I'll never actually master this book. It's too. There's just too much. I want to have Stephen on the show and just be like, thanks for writing this thing. I realized I'll never know everything about MI6 from 25 years ago and back.
Well, it's interesting because I enjoy research. I enjoy researching my novels, and I've written a lot on deviancy, the deviant psychology of some of the people that I write about, and I wanted to know more. So I read a lot, and especially John Douglas, who is the profiler that is outlined in the Mindhunter thing.
Right.
And I read a lot of his stuff, and I enjoyed all of it. Now, some of it is very disturbing, but I was able to get through it, or I wanted to get through it, because I needed the information for what I was working on at the time. So there are a lot of reasons why people read what they do read.
So this is only germane to the topic because I want you to be able to go on this part of the conversation with me. I used to be a spy. My job was to leave the American camps and go into the combat areas, the dangerous, like Iraq, Afghanistan, that kind of thing. And so to develop myself, I read a lot of these kinds of books and books on human nature, just, kind of just making up. There's no reading list. You just sort of just do it, and you have to find your own style within that. And one of the benefits of this is you learn about body language. I'm not omniscient. I use body language as like hints and clues, like in a test, like, oh, I think the body is saying this. Let me ask a question to see if I can validate that. And so it's helping me communicate, but I don't go, ha ha, I see that your mouth is slightly, because I don't have time for that shit. So when you open and you learn these skills, it brings the negative stuff with it too. So like if you learn about when you learn like what child abuse looks like, sexual child abuse looks like, and you see it, you can't stop seeing it. It's everywhere. You see it all the time.
Yeah, and that's a lot. I wouldn't say I deal with child abuse a lot, but there are these animals that I write about. Why are they like they are, a lot of them suffered horrible sex and psychological abuse when they were growing up. Now, that
Yeah,
doesn't mean, that doesn't excuse the way they then
of course.
manifest their own, their own violence, but it does explain it again. But there are a lot of people who go through just the same,
Hmm.
experiences and don't end up killing 27 people because they had a bad childhood. So, but it is interesting to try and figure out. In fact, one of the reasons that I got involved in fiction and taking a true story and turning it into fiction is because so much, in my view, so much of the true crime was the who, what, where, how, and when, but not the why. And I wanted
Yeah.
to understand. I wanted the why. Now, I don't really understand it, but I will develop a why for the reader, so
Mm,
the reader at least knows why the person in my novels is doing the things he is doing. Now, that's my
right.
interpretation, but it satisfies me, and I hope it satisfies the reader.
One of the things you pick up in my line of work too is you learn about all the specs, respect, introspect, perspective, there, everything. And so I've learned to turn the camera around and see things from different angles, and then test my assumption about what I think is being seen from that angle. That's for sure a writer's technique. And so when you develop that why, how much time are you spending in your head before you write and think about these other aspects that are critical to the richness of the story?
Well, I don't think that I take a lot of time while I'm writing. What I do is I fill my head as much as possible with all the research that I can possibly stuff in there. And then as I am writing, I will borrow from it. And I don't even know that it's conscious, but because I have all of this information stored in there, as I am writing and creating a character, it will work its way into that
Mm,
character. But I can't say that I'm writing and I'm saying, oh, okay, well, wait, what did I read on that? Let me put that down on a piece of paper and see how that works out. For instance, in Mapping the Night, there's a character who has a condition where he is allergic to light. There's an actual medical condition where people can't go out in the light. They're allergic to sunlight and to lots of other kinds of light. But I had to do a lot of research so that when I wrote about this character and described him, and obviously he can only do certain things, he can only react a certain way, he has to lead his life in a certain way. So there was that, but I didn't stop in the middle of whatever I was writing and think, what am I read about that? How would he react in this situation? It's already in there, and then it just now, if I'm editing my book, which of course you do 7 or 8 times after you write it, I will often catch things that say to me, "No, that's not right. He couldn't
right.
have done that," and that's where I'll make the change.
Yeah. And then do you force your characters to have these flaws, allergic to sunlight or afraid of this or divorced from that or whatever it is?
Not really. I mean, one of the reasons I had the character that we were just discussing in the novel was I needed some way. The novel takes place in New York. Most of
Mhm.
the instances are at night in New York, so I needed a character who the reader could identify with, and the character that would explain to the reader what was going on at night, and his perspective on the various ways that people handle themselves and things that happen in New York at night, where, I mean, most people don't know. I mean, he goes into Central Park in the middle of the night where most people are told not to go. And he meets people there. He has a life. He has a life at night. So that character was created in order to introduce the audience to this part of the plot. He was very
Right.
important to the plot for that reason.
This book, by the way, just dropped, everybody. It dropped last month, and you can get it. There is the link down below. You know what I'm going to say next? Buddy read. Buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend. Go on a mystery through New York, and it includes Central Park and a guy that has to walk around at night. That sounds pretty cool to me. Definitely do that. That's how you support guys like David, and we can continue to get all these great books out of him as we go along. Are you getting are you getting better at writing?
Absolutely. I go back to some of my earlier books and read them and cringe.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like anything else you do at life. I mean, you take a sport. I mean, if you play it long enough, you're gonna get better at it. If you
Yeah.
write long enough, you're gonna write better. You learn shortcuts. It used to take me almost a year to write a book. Now I can write a book in 6 months, 4 to 6 months.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So there's that aspect of it as well. So yeah, definitely.
What would you say is you try to think of like how an author might get better, right? Like Steinbeck was very parsimonious with his words. He didn't spend them on nothing. He was pretty dear to him, right? But he could say two words like, I love this one, star rattled sky. I know exactly what that looks like. It took him two words. That would take me 150 words to try to get close to what he just said, you know? And then he'd be like, mine's still better. And you'd be like, you know what, you're right. So is it vocabulary? Is it elegance? What do you think? As of many things, I don't know, but how does one get better? How do you specifically get better?
I don't think you consciously sit down and write to get better or get better. You don't know you're getting better. I think it's something that it's like, again, we're talking about a sport. It's an
Yeah.
experience that you have. Let's say you're a punter. You learn how to hold the ball. You learn when to drop the ball. Learn how high to take your leg. I mean, not to get ridiculous here, because
Yeah.
comparing a punter to a writer, but there's that aspect to it. You simply learn how to get better. And you were mentioning the two-word thing. One thing I've learned is that it's very important to be able to cut words in a novel. Sometimes you get, if you're a writer, you get carried away. You love to write, so you get carried away. And
Mhm.
a sentence that has 27 words should only have 3, and you've
Right.
got to be able to do that. And that's very important. People ask me very often, what's most important about how do you become a writer? What's most important about writing? I say,
Mm.
well, first of all, it's discipline. It's being able to sit down every morning or every evening, whenever you choose, and sit 3 or 4 hours in front of a computer without letting yourself get up, without getting a glass of water, a cup of coffee, whatever, just sitting and writing, and being able to force yourself. Well, not really force yourself. It's just a discipline. Because for me, I don't have to force myself. I enjoy it, but you have to be able to do that. And the other thing is to be able to go back over a book and give it to somebody. Well, first of all, to do it yourself, and then to give it to
Yeah.
somebody, let them do it, and be able to accept that. Not get upset, not let your ego get caught up in the need to defend what it is that doesn't need defending.
Yeah, boy, oh boy, that ego, right? Like as we get older, we learn that like how detrimental it is to our success and getting along with others and everything. When my first pass on almost everything, I'm just a dick. I'm just very direct, cocky, and then I go back and I have to soften it up. I've learned that lesson now instead of just turning it in. I've learned to like go, hey, lighten up a little bit, Pete, and communicate better instead of just being this forceful machine of not aggression, but just too cocky. And that took a while to learn, but that was part of me. And by the way, the spy world too, it can never be about me. It can never be about my gains. I have to make sure that the person I'm talking to I can build trust with, and you don't get to do that without getting that ego out of the way, putting it in its cage. I wonder, am I still doing it, just an older version of it, or is there a different part of me that is now out in front of who I am, and the better version of me has to pull that? If it's not ego anymore, what is it?
Well, I think you naturally mellow with age, and you look, what you didn't know. You realize that you don't know everything. I mean,
Mm,
that's all the hallmark of youth is
yeah.
being overly cocky, as the word you used,
Mm.
about what it is you think you know. And as you get older, you realize I don't know shit, and you got to be able to do that. And that's another important element of being a writer. You
Mm.
have to be able to take criticism. You have to be able to hand your book off to somebody and let them tear it apart.
Yeah, yeah, because they're doing it because they love you enough to sit down and read what is not your best work and help you make it better. That's such a wonderful
Absolutely.
thing for someone to give you.
Yeah, you have to find those people. And I always say I've got enough rejection notices to paper my house. And if you're the type that can't take rejection, you're not going to be a
Yeah,
writer. You're not going to be a successful writer for sure.
yeah. When you walk through the supermarket and you go by that what was now very small book rack, when you see that, you don't see your book in there. Does that hurt your heart still, or are you way past that?
Past that.
Okay.
I don't even think I look anymore. I'm not expecting to see it now. Again, you go back to when you're younger. You're younger.
Yeah.
You make special trips to the bookstore to try and find your.
Yes.
When it's not there, if you don't want to ask someone, if you don't want to ask the clerk why it isn't there, you get someone to go and say, go in and ask about the
Yeah.
book, see what they tell you, and come back and tell me. So yeah, I mean, no, but now at this point, again, I write because I like to write. I hope people
Yeah.
read it.
Yeah.
I think I do. I'm a good writer. I think they're going to like my stories, but I'm not going to go to that length.
Yeah. 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 You stand at Walden Books or wherever you're at, like when I walk by your book, someone's
Yeah.
gonna notice me. I'm like, wait, are you the author? It's like it's a human nature thing. You want to be recognized for doing something incredible. And when you're younger and less experienced, that means a lot. It means a lot to a band the first time they hear their music on the radio, but once it's been on the radio 1,000 times, you realize you have to find some other way to enjoy what it is that you do.
Well, I remember the first time I held one of my published books in my hands. I thought I died and gone to heaven. That
Right.
was the most wonderful thing. I think I must have taken 98 photographs of the book, the cover, the back cover, the front cover, me with the book, my wife with the book, my dog with the book, everybody with the book. Now, okay, the book's out. That's wonderful. Moving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How long does the book stay precious to you? Like, yeah, you're not it's like, hey, let's take 98 pictures. You don't do a photo shoot anymore. But at some point, you are going to put down mapping the night, and it's going to be a thing that you did, and you'll talk about it. But like, we're certainly not going to dive deep into your other novels, I don't think, in this, because you're going forward, not backward.
As soon as a book is written and I move on to another one, I'm done.
Okay.
Not that I don't respect the work that I did. It's
Yeah.
wonderful, and I always respect that, and how hard it was, how difficult it was to create this thing. But I've moved on. As soon as that book is written and it leaves my hands, it goes to the agent and then to the publisher. I don't really think about it much anymore. People always say, "Well, what's your favorite book?" I say, "Well, that's like asking a parent who their favorite child is." That you can't do
Yeah.
that. My favorite book doesn't exist yet. It'll be my next book when I'm
Yeah.
writing it. That
Yeah.
will be my favorite book.
It's the same thing on this end. Someone will say, "Oh, what's the best show?" And I'm like, really, it's the next one.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm excited about, because I haven't had that conversation. And in my world, I can produce a lot, like way faster than books. A lot less specific, a lot less demanding on how great it is. But you do amass a body of work that just it's satisfying. I was listening to an old show today, doing some work with that content, and I'm like, man, this is really. I was enjoying my own show. So
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and you go back. I have to admit that if I see a book of mine on the shelf somewhere, I'll pull it down and then I will just, pick a page and read the page
Yeah,
and think,
yeah,
that's not bad. That's, this guy's pretty
yeah,
good. But that's about the extent of it.
yeah. And echoing what you just said, 95% of my work is in the future. It's the next thing
Yeah.
I'm working on. You and I will finish this. I'll do some due diligence on trying to get the show to go out and that kind of thing. But that's all more post-production as opposed to like the enjoyable stuff. That's more workity work. But and then I move on pretty quickly to the next show, because there's another one scheduled, and that person needs my attention as well, and the audience also. Like, we're all chewing through things. It is very fast, but it's not any faster than, like, say, being on the Carson show 40 years ago. You get that one shot on the Carson show, maybe you come back, maybe never again, but you have to move on to the next thing.
Well, not only that, but we live in a world where everything is much faster and people's
Yeah.
attention spans are so much shorter. I mean, you have all these social media outlets where everybody has, 10 seconds, and they write something, and everybody's attention span is focused on that. And then they move to the next Facebook post, or the next Instagram, the next Twitter. We're not calling it Twitter anymore. Call it X. The next X, whatever's on X. So, there's that element as well, I think.
It's also funny. Sometimes I'll contribute, and things that I know about, and we'll say like it's Israel versus Hamas or something like that. And the person will say, we don't have time to read all these words. And I'm like, it's 250 words. It's 3 paragraphs. It's just not that much. And this is an extremely complicated topic. If you want me to like go, man, 5 words, that then I'm not doing justice to how complex this thing is.
Well, I think that's one, and I don't want to get off on politics, but I think
For
that's
sure.
one of the things that's wrong or that's difficult today with politics that wasn't when I was involved.
Mhm.
Um, that is, everybody wants an instant solution that fits on their Facebook page or
Yeah.
fits in their Instagram or whatever to a problem, and there are no there are no easy answers to difficult problems, and people expect that and they want that, but they're not going to get it. Well, if they get it, it's the wrong answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move all the way away from that. Let's just completely retrack. And when you write thrillers, thrillers are it's a it's a place you can write thrillers and people are going to buy them and they're going to go on the ride with you. It is really hard to get a thriller made on screen. Do you have any theory on why that is? Like why they do so well? I just read the sequel to Pump for Red October. My buddies Andrews and Wilson wrote it, and I was over
Mhm.
the moon reading it. I loved it, and I would love to see it made in a movie. I don't know that they will, because they just don't make thrillers as frequently. I don't know why that genre is not supported in film.
Well, I don't have a quick answer to that. I would say that if you look at television today, it's what we were talking about. They want something quick and easy to do. That's why reality shows are so popular. They're quick, they're easy, they don't have to pay anybody, and
Yeah.
and I think that's probably the case with anything. Thrillers being in that, it's a separate genre from the reality shows or something else, but I think it's the same aspect as you're dealing with everything else. If people want something quick and easy they can enjoy, thrillers have complex plots. Usually, they
Hmm.
have a number of different characters that are reacting to each other in these complex plots. You have to have an audience that's willing to sit through something that has a lot of characters and a complex plot. I don't, I think that all those things militate against thrillers being something that's going to find time on the screen.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems to me, I want you to correct me on this because I'm not sure I'm accurate. It seems to me that thrillers do well in the story setting, at least, do well in certain places. It's hard to tell a thriller in Wyoming. There's just not even a million people in that state, so it's pretty hard to figure things out. But maybe I'm wrong about that. But is it because we are tired of watching a story that takes us to New York City or to DC, and we get into the underbelly of things, and there's intrigue and thrilling to be had? But am I right about that? Like maybe it gets a little tied to giant metropolitan areas.
Well, first of all, it's easier for a writer to write about something that's going on in New York or Washington because it's there's a
Yeah.
lot going on there. There are a lot of different places you can take a character, you can take a story. I
Hmm.
also think it has a lot to do with the population. Our urban population now is dominant. You no longer have a lot of people living in rural areas, living in
Mm.
places like Wyoming or Utah. So you're not writing for them. You're writing for the people who live in New York and in Washington,
Washington.
Chicago, L.A. Those are the places where you're going to find your readers. Now, I don't think that's
Mm.
conscious, but I just think it's because who we are in this country today.
What's the difference between a mystery and a thriller? Like, and those things overlap, but how would you describe that?
Well, I don't think a thriller has to be a mystery necessarily.
Okay.
A mystery has to be a mystery. A
Mhm.
thriller, there doesn't have to be a mystery in the thriller itself, but you have to be able to connect all that. You have to be able to bring all the characters together in a thriller. Maybe you don't have to in a mystery. Thrillers to me are multi-layered stories, not all of which are mysteries. Some parts of Mapping the Night are mysterious, others are not. It's
Mhm.
more of a thriller because it's not. You're not sitting around necessarily trying to figure everything out. Some of it is already figured out. I mean, and it not necessarily laid out by the author. It's just the way things come together in a thriller. All the different plots come together. In a mystery, you got to have that question mark. In a thriller, you don't.
Yeah, yeah. And then what about like a crime movie or a caper movie and a thriller? How are they different?
Uh, Boy, you're asking some tough questions here. Things I never thought
Yes.
of before in my entire life. Uh, I think there's probably, again, I'm just have to hark back to it. In a
Yeah.
crime movie, you know who's committing the crime. That's not the necessarily the mystery
Right.
of it all. In fact, there's no mystery because you know who committed the crime. Um, so those are the different elements of these various genres you're talking about,
Yeah.
whether it's a mystery or isn't a mystery, and again, I don't think the audience cares. I think the audience, whether it's watching a movie or reading a book, if it's well written, if you have characters who the reader can identify with, I think that the book will sell.
There's a bit of a method to my madness, or maybe there's a madness in my method on bringing these things up because you get, like a crime story. Maybe it's thrilling, but you tend to have this protagonist antagonist spiral where they're coming after each other in some way. But thrillers aren't bound to that. And it seems to me, and again, you're the writer, so you tell me, that thrillers are a little less bound to convention, like a police procedural would be on TV or in a novel.
Yeah, I agree. Police procedural, crime, a true crime book, those all follow the just the facts, man, kind of thing. A thriller doesn't necessarily work on that level.
Yeah.
Um, in a thriller, well, the thrillers that I write, for instance, as I mentioned, I'm looking for the whys. I'm not looking for the. I've got the other stuff in it, the hows, the when, the where, and all that sort of stuff. But I'm looking for the why. Is
Yeah.
the way I write. So I think that might be some answer to your question, or a bit of an answer.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And then do you like to stay in the same universe and write even if it's adjacent, or do you try to completely make new things each time?
When you say make new things, are you talking about me personally, where I write, the
Yeah, like
location?
where's your favorite spot? Do you want completely original, or do you want to play around in the same universe, even if those characters never interact? I mean, are you writing in the same world?
Yeah, I think so, and I think all of my characters are from the same world. I think it would be too difficult for me. I don't have that kind of imagination. For instance, I mean,
Okay.
if we're talking about science fiction or something going way outside
Yeah.
my comfort zone, I couldn't do that. I have to stay in a thriller, true crime, political kind of milieu for me to be comfortable.
Yeah. Well, right now we're talking to David Bethel and his book. The link is down below. It's called Mapping the Night. It's set in New York City. What's your favorite element about this new book? Like, what really got you fired up? Was there something on TV that you read, or what was it that really sparked it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that there's always one thing
Yep.
that sets me off. And I read a story in the New York Times about some cops that did a welfare check at an apartment building in New York City, because the neighbors had not seen the woman or her child for a couple of days and were worried. So they did the welfare check. Unfortunately, they walked in on a scene where the woman was dead. She had been strangled and raped, and her son was sitting by her side, uh, rubbing ice cubes on her forehead to try and revive her, because he told the cops, "This is what my mommy does when I get sick. So this is what I thought would help out. But you got to help me. Nothing's happening here." Of course, as I said, the woman was dead, and I studied this particular case a little bit. Um, it was a serial killer. She was the victim of a serial killer, a man who had actually been in jail for murder prior to that, got out and started committing murders all over again. And there were certain elements of that scene
Mm.
where they found her that it was immaculate. It was cleaned up very well, but more than you would find if a perpetrator was simply trying to get rid of any evidence of himself. It was immaculate. It was like that she had a maid come in and clean it all up, wipe down the windows, everything else. So that was an element that was a little mysterious, and they found that in each instance where he had killed someone, there was that element. Obviously, he was going around cleaning the apartments, and he only preyed on women who were single mothers of young
Mm.
boys. So I put all that together, and I went off. I kind of, I just took off from there and went from there, and that's the way I write. I pick one
Yeah.
thing and move on from it.
When you sit down at the beginning of that, the ice cubes on the face and all that stuff, right? When do you come out of it and be like, "Whoa, all right, how much did I just write?" Like, is it hours? Are you an iron butt guy, or how long do you stay into that like what I kind of envision as a trance as you
Yeah,
get that inspiration and you write it?
you do. You sit down and you start writing. And as I said, I write the way I want to read. So I become the reader. I'm writing, but I'm also
Mm,
reading. So I usually spend 3.5, 4 hours writing. But as my wife says, I'm gone. Once I start writing, I'm pretty much
yeah,
gone for 4 to 6 months, because even when I get up, I hadn't noticed this, but she notices it all the time. She says she can ask me a question, and I either won't answer, or I'll give her some nonsense answer, because I'm really thinking about. And sometimes I don't even know it that I'm doing that,
yeah,
but I'm
yeah,
obviously thinking about what I just wrote and what I'm going to write next. So to answer your question, I probably never really come out of it until I finish the
yeah.
novel.
I think this is something that we develop as adults if we're attuned to it and comfortable with it. But my special someone will say, "Hey, where were you?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I was nowhere near here. I was gone in a completely different place." And the same thing with her. I'm like, where were you just at?" But we have this ability, I think, as adults, to accept these alternate realities. I don't know how real they are, but I don't know that they're not real. Like, is there reality in this fiction that you make up? Are you going to a real place that actually exists? I mean, we're getting existential and transcendental, but what do you think? Like, where do you actually go?
Well, it exists for me.
Yeah.
The world that I'm creating exists for me. Now, I don't know that that answers your question, but while I'm in that world, certainly the characters and the whatever they're going through, the story, the plot, whatever you want to call it, it
Hmm.
exists for me. I've created a world that exists for me, and it exists for the time I'm sitting there, 4 to 6 months to
Yeah.
write a book. Now, obviously, it only exists on a piece of paper, but in my mind, it exists. Now, having said that, I would like to think that when a reader is sitting down and reading the book, it exists for them too. They can put the
Hmm.
book down, but hopefully, I mean, they're not going to be in it the same way I am as a writer, but hopefully they're in it enough that they want to get back and see what happens. They want to be back in that world.
No.
And that is why I write the way I do. I
Mm.
want to be able to stay in that world. I can't stay in that world if I've already prepared an outline, if I've already know
Yeah.
what the characters, how they're going to react and everything else. I can't be in that world. Then all I'm doing is I'm technically putting something down, words down on a piece of paper, which doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Are you safe when you're in that world?
Yeah, I'm safe because I'm controlling it. I'm, for lack of a better word, I'm God in that world.
Yeah.
I nothing can harm me because I can always erase it. I can always hit the delete button, and I'm gone. I'm out of the world. So yeah, I'm the safest person in the world in that book.
My friend Kat Connor, well, for a long time she wrote this FBI special unit series called the Bite series, and she goes to her work. She lives in New Zealand, and she can channel things that happen in DC, roads, intersections, places, and she really knows these characters. She grieves when they die. She understands the music that they like, and she really has this supernatural connection to these places and people that she writes about. And the whole thing just fascinates because your logical mind's like, blah, that's not really happening. But really, when you're sitting there with your significant other and they're like, hey, 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 and you're like, what, huh? I mean, you are breaking like the 32K baud modem in your head. You break contact and you really do come back from somewhere. And so I think there is something to being able to teleport or to connect to a space to know things that you shouldn't be able to know. And that gets into the quantum world, right? But if the quantum world says we're connected, well, then yeah, we're connected.
Well, interestingly enough, on that subject, there are certain characters that I write that I haven't been able to let go of for a couple of books because
I was, I was going to
I
get into that.
admire
Yeah.
them. I admire these characters. I'm beginning to know them as well as I know other people, real people in my life. So for 3 books, I've kept 2 characters in each of those
Mhm.
books. The one I'm writing now does not yet have them. They might appear because it simply work. It might work for me, but there are, and I think a lot of writers will tell you that there are characters that work for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great. Yeah. So you're talking about your other books. By the way, anybody who wants to check out John's work on other books, you can obviously go to Amazon, or you can just click on this link right here. And guess what? If you just type his name in, it'll come up. It's pretty easy. But there you go. You can, yeah, you can definitely see those things. So that link will pop up here in the remarks in a couple seconds. Yeah. So when you have these characters that you come back to, do you grieve? Like Kat grieves when people get shot and killed, and she feels the anxiety of pre-operations when they're going to go to an objective and do things. She really gets emotional, and it's physically represented in how she feels.
Well, I wouldn't say that I probably have that kind of reaction, but there are characters who have something happen to them, and it's tough to write sometimes, to sit down and write these things. For that matter, it's tough because of the things I write about. For me to write about some of the abuse that other characters take from my bad guys in the book. So
Yeah.
you have to compartmentalize, I think, to a certain degree, and to be able to do things like that.
Yeah. Do you need to go to the place that you're writing about? Like you write about Las Vegas as well. Do you like, hey, I get to go to Vegas and take some pictures, and the picture ends up on the cover of the book? I mean, is this part of the process where like, I need to go to this place, I need to go to Rome or wherever it is?
It has been. I lived and worked in New York in Washington for many years, so I knew Washington real well. I worked for Senator Paul Axel from Nevada, so I was out in Las Vegas and in Nevada a lot, and I've gone back to Nevada. In fact, one of the reasons I went back, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but there is a 200-mile tunnel system below the city of Las Vegas where a lot of people live in. It's supposed to be aqueducts that takes the water from one side of the city to the other when they have these horrible floods that they have, because as we all know, it doesn't rain much out there, but when it rains, it really rains. And there was no way to control the flow of the water. So they built these tunnels underneath the city. And I wanted to incorporate them in my book, but I didn't know anything about them other than what I read. So I went out there and actually went in one of these tunnels to see what it was all about. I didn't get very deep because it's pretty scary. I mean, there's some scary people living there, but I wanted to know what it was like. So to answer your question, yes, there are times when I have done that. And of course, New York, as far as New York goes, I don't know. We have to step back a second. My dad was in the Foreign Service, so we spent most of my life traveling around the world. The only I didn't come back to the United States till I was 14. I had no real relationship with the United States other than I knew it existed, and we would come back every once in a while. So the place we would come back to would be New York, because my mother was born and raised in Brooklyn, and so I developed kind of a relationship with New York as the first place I came back to as an American. It was the first American city that I knew of. So I had that kind of love for New York, and that's evident, I hope, in Mapping the Night.
Yeah. Yeah, Mapping the Night takes place in New York. What when you say New York, do you just really mean Brooklyn, or do you mean, these parts of these boroughs, or can you get yourself all the way out to Long Island and I don't know, Massapequa or somewhere and write stories out there as well?
Well, I could, I suppose. In this instance of Mapping the Night, it's the Upper East and West Side, the more Tony areas. The Plaza Hotel is part of the book. The Dakota, the shopping areas and Central Park. That area are the stars, in my opinion, of the book. The locations around New York, because they're important, very, very important to the novel. So yes, I could if I needed to, but in this instance, it is New York City and those specific areas of New York.
Right. And then, are you a Yankees fan, Mets fan? Don't care about baseball? Where are you at?
No. I was a huge Dodger fan, Brooklyn Dodger fan. My mom, as I said, my mother born and grew up in Brooklyn, and my grandparents lived there. We came back always to Brooklyn when I would come back to the States for months at a time or weeks at a time on home visits, and my grandfather would always take me out to see the Brooklyn Dodgers play, and my relationship to the Brooklyn Dodgers is really quite interesting because when we were living overseas, the Dodgers came to Japan for a barnstorming tour after I think they won the series in '55, and I was a little kid. But my dad became friendly with Walter O'Malley, who was the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he invited us for lunch. For breakfast one day at the Imperial Hotel in downtown Tokyo. So my dad took the family down there. We were expecting to have lunch with just Walter O'Malley, and it turns out we sat at the table with all the Dodgers. I mean, I sat next to Jackie Robinson. And it's sitting at that table were Jackie Robinson, Duke Snider, Pee Wee Reese, Carl Ferrello, Gil Hodges. I mean, if I had died the next day as a kid, I lived and breathed Dodgers, sitting at that table and just, I'm not even sure I ate breakfast. But the part of that, too, was the next day they were playing a team in Tokyo, and Walter O'Malley arranged for me to sit in the dugout. So, I mean, that's just unbelievable. And the first person to come out of I was sitting in the dugout by myself. The first person to come out to take the field was Jackie Robinson. And he comes over and he sits down with me because I sat down next to him at the breakfast and we exchanged pleasantries, but I hadn't really talked to him. So I want to talk baseball. I mean, they had just come off a World Series where they played the Yankees. They played against Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford and, Yogi Berra. I wanted to talk baseball. All he wanted to talk about was my living in Japan, how I liked it, how I got along with the Japanese kids and what it was like living overseas in all these different places. I think it was then that I realized in my own immature little way, this guy's a lot more than a baseball player. But it was just such a thrill to be able to have those experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Any chance you write about that? That's an amazing event, even if it's just an article or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't. I don't think, I'm trying to go back years and years and years and years. I've written about some of the things that happened to me while I was overseas, and I don't think I've written about that. But I'm sure at some point it'll come out of the computer.
Yeah, it's crazy because obviously you have a human memory of Jackie Robinson. Jackie's wife is still with us, and I don't know what kind of shape she is. Yeah, over 100 years old, but our history, man, it's just not that far back. Is it John Tyler has living grandkids or one living grandson still? Grandson, not great, but I mean, this is a remarkably young.
Realize too, they don't realize the effect that Jackie Robinson had on the American psyche, on the American public. I mean, back when he broke into the major leagues, baseball was everything. Baseball was the sport. Basketball and football were kind of outliers. And for him to do what he did and succeed at what he did, despite the incredible abuse that he took as a human being, it was just astounding. And I don't think people really understand, other than, being the first black baseball player, there's so much more to it than just that.
Yeah. Who was your guy? Was it Jackie? Was it Sandy Amoros? Was it Duke? Who was your guy on that team?
Duke of Flatbush, because he lived near my grandparents, and I used to see him, and he was my guy.
Yeah, that's great. So someone else who's been on the show, his uncle was Vin Scully, and he's working on probably writing a book about that, and he doesn't divulge a lot of family stuff, but there was a time when that was a lot more common because we just were a lot smaller and packed in a little tighter. And so, you could see Willie Mays do some amazing thing at the grocery store, like buy bananas. And you're like, Willie Mays bought bananas. He touched these bananas. I'm going to buy these bananas. Like these things could happen a lot more. We were a lot more intermingled too, I think, as a society. I don't want to go too far down that road, but I guess the main thing I want to say is, man, thank you for coming on the show.
Sure.
We've got a couple minutes left here. We can wrap it up with some final thoughts, that kind of thing. But the first thing I want to say is get mapping the night, everybody. You heard David talk about all these excellent parts of his books and everything. What do you want to close with? What do you want to say?
Well, I've been asked that before. I have no words of wisdom to add. It's just that I do appreciate your asking me to come on board, and I hope that your audience enjoyed our exchange.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Are you going to get some audiobooks going with all your books? Everybody's going audio nowadays.
I suppose that's up to the publisher. I suppose that they will, if that's the direction they want to head in. One of my first books it was an audio book, I think. Yeah, Evil Town is an audio book.
Okay, I
The
didn't know that.
others, yeah, the others are not. So it's up to the publisher. I hope he does. I mean, obviously for a lot of reasons, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll
Well, I
tell him
appreciate
you
it. Let me
asked.
run these. I will. Yeah, tell them I asked. Yeah, I brought them up because it definitely is easier for me to listen to the book than sit down and read it. Thank you again for coming on. I'm going to run these credits. Hang in there 1 second. I'll say bye to you. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.